Let's look now at a couple of alternatives for white on move 7 after bishop e3, knight bd7. E4 d6, d4 knight f6, knight c3, g6, f4, bishop g7, knight f3, castles, bishop e3, knight bd7. And now a pretty dangerous move is the move e5, which attacks this knight on f6, obviously. Black should reply to this with knight to g4 rather than the passive knight to e8. And then after bishop back to g1, the move he has to play here is c5, undermining white's pawn centre. Well, white can't now play the pawn to h3. Black would then play c takes d4, and after bishop takes d4, this pawn on e5 is falling, d takes e5, and black gets a very good game like that. So after c5, the critical move is the move e6, and now black would play f takes e6, but he has what seems at first sight to be a problem after the move knight g5, threatening the pawn on e6 and also the knight on g5. Well, he has a very good move here, but it's good to actually know about this stuff, to go into these lines with confidence rather than having to work them out of the board. The move is queen to b6, ignoring the attack on the knight on g5 and hitting this pawn on b2 with the queen. So after queen b6, well, if white takes on g4, which is what he did in a game between Lanka and Schlosser from Ternava in 1989, he took the knight on g4, whereupon black played queen takes b2, hitting the knight, also hitting the rook. White played knight to d1. Black played queen to 8 takes a1. White brought his bishop out to c4. He could have tried queen takes e6 check here. It's not very good, but he could have tried it. Queen takes e6 check, king h8, knight f7 check, rook takes f7, queen takes f7, and now black would play knight f6 when he has really what's a winning position, because he's level on material, but white's king and all his pieces are on the back rank. The best developed piece is the queen on f7. Yeah, to be a disaster for white, that position. Okay, Lanka played bishop to c4, and then knight f6 followed. Bishop takes e6 check, king h8, and queen back to e2, and black played c takes d4 with really again what's a winning position. If you play something like knight f7 check, then rook takes f7, bishop takes f7 is going to be tremendous for black after, say, bishop to g4. Now, if we now go back to the position after queen b6, white can do some other things here. If he plays rook b1, I don't think this is very good, because then black would play rook takes f4, protecting the knight on g4. And if knight takes e6, there would follow rook takes f1 check, king takes f1, and now knight on d7 to f6 with a really good game for black. He's got a couple of pawns for the exchange and extremely active pieces as well. So I don't think that would be at all good for white. After queen b6, probably the main move, or the best move that white could have played, would have been knight takes e6. So by keeping the queen on d1, he's not quite so vulnerable to queen takes b2, because the queen actually protects the rook on a1. So knight takes e6 is a move. Black would play queen takes b2 anyway, and then if knight to d5, there would follow knight d to f6 still, and it looks pretty good for white. Say if he goes, well, if he takes on f8, we can actually take this knight on d5, or if he plays rook b1, then we can take the pawn on a2, and all of this looks very nice for black. Knight takes e7 check. We can even play king to f7, so that after knight takes f8 we go king takes e7, and then the knight on f8 is trapped. So that also looks very good for black. There's one other possibility, which was used in a game between Nisipienu and Stoica, where black had to face knight a4 in this position, and what he should have played, he didn't play it, he should have played queen to a3, and after knight takes f8, take on f8 with his king, and then after queen takes g4, play queen takes a4, with again a tremendous game for black. He's got several pawns coming for the exchange, and white's king is still in the middle. Black's pieces are enormously active. I think this position would be really quite excellent for black. Now, e5 is certainly the dangerous seventh move alternative for white. It turns out that it's probably more dangerous for white than it is for black. White has also played a move h3, which isn't really very logical. I mean, he's taking the g4 square away from this knight on f6, but apart from that, it doesn't really have very much to recommend it. Black would play c5 against this. If white does something like e5, then black would play knight e8. In a game between Friis-Nielsen and Keane from Aarhus in 1983, white met this move c5 by pushing his pawn on with d5. Black then got a very good position by going b5, apparently sacrificing a pawn, but it isn't a sacrifice at all. When Friis-Nielsen took the pawn on b5, he was met by the move knight takes e4, which is a typical Pirc modern type tactic that's well worth remembering. The point is that after knight takes e4, which is what Friis-Nielsen played, black plays queen a5 check, forking king and bishop. White blocked it with knight c3, but then after bishop takes c3 check, bc, queen takes b5, black was already better because white can't castle. His pawn structure is really quite ruined, and even the opposite colour bishops didn't save white in the game. He lost pretty quickly. Now, after d5, b5, white could have considered going e5 in this position, but then I think black gets a very good game by going knight h5, and after bishop takes b5, which is taking the pawn a move later, black would play d takes e5, and if f takes e5, he goes knight g3, hitting the rook on h1. After rook g1, he plays knight takes e5, and again I think it's really an excellent position for black. This bishop on g7 in particular is starting to bear down on this long diagonal, and all black's pieces are very active. Okay, that brings us to the end of bishop e3. Next up, bishop e2 and the other moves.